Ask the Podcast Coach for July 8th, 2023.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there, the one and only Jim Cullison from The Average Guy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Always good to be back on a Saturday morning. It feels I got up early. I got to walk in. I'm feeling fresh.
That was me. I got up. I was really surprised. I got up before the alarm clock went off.
Ooh.
And was like, oh, I can start working on the show. So I did that and made some eggs, and we're good to go. And hey, well, before I'm ready just to jump into topics, but you know what goes good with eggs, don't you?
Yeah, a little bit of coffee, maybe.
A little bit of coffee.
There we go.
And that's really interesting because when I was here a minute ago, Jim, all my slides were here, and now
you dropped out.
Yeah, that coffee pour is brought to you by Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you need artwork, if you need a whole website, if you need a handout, if you need anything to look good, Mark is your man. He's been a podcaster for 10 years, and he's been an award-winning graphic artist longer than that. And if you're watching the video, you see some of the artwork he's done for me, and now there's more from other clients. And he's going to take that really personalized approach to make sure that whatever he designs for you matches whatever it is you're trying to convey. So the beauty of it is you don't have to explain what the heck a podcast is. You're going to get something that totally matches and just looks phenomenal. I was doing some things this weekend where I kept uploading my logo, and I was like, this is amazing. So check him out, podcastbranding.co.
Big thanks to our good friend Dan Lefebvre over there, Based on a True Story podcast at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. And if you're looking for, if you want to know, hey, how much of that movie is actually based on a true story, Dan will tell you some great episodes going on over there. And he's just a super awesome dude. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for your sponsorship. Check it out, basedonatruestorypodcast.com.
Jim, do you remember the 80s?
Barely.
Yeah. Remember there was like, I don't know, there'd be like a band called Cinderella.
Yeah.
And they had a song, they had a couple hits, Don't Know What You Got, and blah, blah, blah. And then they came out with another band called Girl School that looked and sounded a lot like Cinderella. And you kind of went to them and you went, yeah, I kind of liked it the first time when it was called,
Weren't Poison and Rat just the same?
Kind of this, yeah. A little more makeup on the Poison side.
Same people, maybe different drummer. I don't know.
So I loaded up threads from our good friends at Meta and went, oh, it's Twitter. Look, they remade Twitter, only this one, they made Twitter. And they gave it a new name. And here's the fun thing. I hope you like Threads, because if you install it, according to Jen Briney from Congressional Dish, reading it from my Threads thing, I literally spent like 4 minutes on this and went, wait, so you just gave me more work, Meta. Thank you. I now, if I want to, but she said
Mastodon was the same thing, right? I mean, when Twitter did its thing,
it's true.
Everybody went to, we're going to do Mastodon. Okay, it's just another, how a Discord. It's just another thing. Yeah. I don't know. How many in the chat room have jumped on? Throw it in the chat if you've jumped on Threads. Keep going, Dave. Sorry.
But no, Jen says, I hope you like it, because if you deactivate Threads, you also deactivate Instagram, and that could be a problem.
A real big problem for some people who are big on Instagram, for sure.
But I mean, I literally look at it and I go, it's Twitter. It's literally, it's just Twitter. And I'm like, why would I want another app? Like, you just gave me more work. And I know their answer is, yeah, but so many people are leaving Twitter. And I'm like, are they really? Like, I know there are some people that are like, I'm out of here. Elon is the Antichrist and blah, blah. I'm like, okay, well, I just, the minute I opened it, I was like, my initial reaction was, oh, thanks. You just gave me more work. Here's one more place that I've got to go. And I was just like, that's, ugh. So I was not just for the fact that if you're going to give me a product, make it better than the old one. And their answer was, no, we're just going to. And from what I understand, now this is, I don't know if it's gossip or what, but the people that help create Threads are ex-Twitter employees.
Yeah,
It was
it
like,
makes sense. Like a lot of them left when Elon came in, and if you're Zuckerberg, you go, "Hey, come on, come on over here. We've
yeah,
got a little project you can work on." I think it took them a little longer to get it out than they wanted to. I think they were
yeah,
trying to get that a lot faster. It's hard to scale one of those things. Making it's one thing, getting it to scale globally is another. So I think it took them just a little bit longer than they were hoping. It's another, like I said, it's another thing to watch. Yeah, we'll see.
yeah. That
Does
was
it
me.
does it become something, or does it? It would be hard for it to become something unless it offered something more. And listen, I know folks have been leaving Twitter, but plenty of people have been staying. So, uh, you know,
Well, and I know Twitter did the thing where you can only see X amount of tweets a day, which was weird. And if it's free, and it was like something like 600, you can only see 600 tweets a day unless you get your little blue check mark.
what a
And
dumpster fire! What a dumpster
yeah,
fire!
and I was
Yeah.
just like,
Oh
okay,
my
so.
gosh. Yeah.
But Tim says Poison Rat, Quiet Riot, all the same band, just different members. Actually, the lead guitarist of Quiet Riot is now in Rat. So that's actually true because Tim also says I'm on Threads.
Okay.
So and when I just pulled it up, I was like, oh, it's Twitter. So yeah, so it's will it be the next what was the one thing? Clubhouse,
Yeah,
is it?
Blab. Yeah,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's like it's another social thing,
Well,
and I'm like,
I'm
how is it even different from Instagram? I mean, Instagram is supposed to be more photos, but I just saw a bunch of photos on
yeah,
Threads. I'm like,
yeah,
what?
yeah.
I think it's just them going. I don't know. It's like you said. Is it going to be the same thing as Mastodon? Like, here's an
Right.
alternative to Twitter if you hate it, but the nice thing about Twitter, for a while at least, everybody was on it. So yay, decentralization. I love it in podcasting. I hate it in social
True.
media.
That's true. That's very true. That's very true.
Well, here is an interesting question that we don't. I was like, well, it's different, and I'll be interested to see. Uh, this was from, I think, Reddit. And we should probably mention, if you're wondering, I'm using the new PodMic USB, but I'm not using USB. We'll talk about that when we get done with this. But in case anybody's like, oh, wait, that's not the SM7B,
And
we'll
it does
talk about
sound a little different.
does
I
it?
think it's a little crisper. You got a little bit better. You have
A little
some
more
bottom.
S's and T's.
We have a little more bottom end without it being too bassy, and it's
Yeah.
a little clearer.
Yeah. When I put it on, I wasn't like, all right, I don't hate it. That's cool.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
But this person asked, do you guys enjoy any podcasts that you can tell are somewhat amateur? And I'm just curious because I'm launching my first audio drama soon, and I'm fully aware it isn't the best script or the best quality all around, but I put a lot of work into it. Boy, they know how to sell it, don't they? It's not very good, but I get it though. I'm pretty nervous because although I've gotten some good feedback, that's good. Thumbs up. I've also gotten quite a bit of flack with my pilot episode. That's not good, which isn't stopping me considering this is my first time launching a podcast. Okay. I've heard some podcasts that are so well done and sound as professional as can be with sound effects and music and a script. I've also heard some where it's almost a chore to listen to. So I was wondering if there are any podcasts that you like that may have bad sound quality and or just a not so great story. I'm genuinely curious if the average listener wants that really professional sound podcast. Well, he's kind of talking about two things here. One is sound quality, and one is content. So I've heard Jim Harold, who is like the king of paranormal podcasts, has said that, and this is a guy, he does it full time. He's kind of like Dan, right? And he's just doing it full time. He's bought some decent gear. He does live streams. He has like 4 or 5 different podcasts. He's got books. He's got multiple streams of income. And he said it was one of the weirdest comments he's ever got was somebody said, I like your show, but you sound too professional. And it wasn't, and he's not doing a, hey, everybody, what's going on? Traffic and weather. He's not doing that. It was just, wow, this sounds really good. And I was like, so does it have to sound crappy to be legit? And I was like, so when I saw this question, I'm like, I wonder if that's what that person is talking about. I don't know. So have you ever, what do you consider amateur? I mean, we're amateurs, right?
Oh,
Kind
for
of.
sure. Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
so beauty is such in the eye of the beholder on this one. And as far as what you're looking for, I was just listening to a podcast this last week, which I really like. It's one of my favorite podcasts. Two guys chatting about stuff, and not this one, I'm not that conceited. So, anyways, but it's another podcast. And this week they changed. One of the hosts dropped out, and one of their business partners came in, and it was a different vibe. And the two of them, the regular hosts together, have a really good vibe. And I love their jokes, and they, they're just. But when this new guest, or when this new guest host came in, the guy who was regularly on it tried to act like, or tried to get the guest host to be like the regular host, if you know where I'm going with this. So was explaining all the inside jokes, and was like trying to do some of the same humor that they do, but it's a different person. And
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to say, just stop. Stop for a second. That's not going to work. That dynamic's not going to work between the two of you. You've got to treat that new person like they're their own person. Don't force them into the mold of the podcast. And so I think sometimes along those lines too, we need to adapt to every single situation we're in. And it's easy if we're doing new guests all the time, you automatically do that. But Dave, it's different. I notice you're a little bit different when, like when we had Dan on a couple weeks ago. You get used to me, right? And then somebody else comes in, and you're like, okay, how does this, you got to figure out the rhythm, and how does this work, and kind of thing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it was just, that's what came to mind when I heard you read that question.
Well, the other one was where he said, I've gotten some feedback, and, which was good, but people are giving me a lot of flack about my pilot episode. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're getting, unless they're trying to make your show something that it's not, I've been working on moving the School of Podcasting to a new platform. And one of the things when I was working with this business coach, they said, have you ever done a video sales letter? And I'm like, no, but, they're like, they work. You should try one. So I went to ChatGPT because I know the formula, right? It's here's a problem, agitate it, here's the solution, bonus, blah, blah, blah. So I asked ChatGPT, what are the components of a good video sales letter? And it basically said that. So I was like, great. I said, here are the 5 features of the School of Podcasting. Take these features and write a script for that. Now, what's funny about this, the actual script, I used maybe 18 words of it, if that. But a lot of it was like, oh, I see where they're going. I'd never say that. And I thought, okay, it's not bad. I throw it out to my newsletter and said, hey, talk about this like I'm not in the room. I'm like, here, I put it on Loom, and you can leave a comment right there at the time when you see it. And I got such great feedback that, like, one of them I have, because there's a fair amount in the middle that's testimonials. But the first one was from David Hooper, and it was pretty long. And the rest were like, I think David's was like almost 40 seconds, and the others were like 20, here's 20. And like 4 or 5 people said, I would mix those up. Like, that's not a bad testimonial, but you kind of like hit the testimonial, and it's a lot of Dave. Like, let's put Dave later. And then I did, but I also cut out, I only had my testimonials talk about the benefits, not really like their background. Because really, that's a testimony is like, here's how I benefited. Yeah. And then things like, for whatever reason, I decided to get a big voice deep man from 11 Labs. So I got a robo announcer that said, introducing the School of Bud. Everybody's like, I don't know what that is, but why aren't you saying that? And so, to make a long story, I had like probably, let's say just for easy math, let's say we had 10 really good points, and we had one that I got their point, but they were trying to pull the sales letter in a different direction. Because I start off kind of like, does this sound normal to you where you're frustrated and you don't want gear to buy? And again, I'm identifying the problem. And they're like, why not start off with something happy? And I'm like, I get that point. But if you watch every infomercial, it's like, is this you? And they, feeding your kids crap for dinner. They're going to die soon because you feed the, it's like, but look now, it's Happy Mac, whatever it is. So I was like, no, I'm going with the infomercial thing. So feedback is huge. And one that I didn't even think about, but I must have had Dan in mind, is you'd have this testimonial, picture of the person, picture of their artwork, whatever. And then when they said, like, I'm just going to use the phrase, when they got to the money shot, right? You're like, when they say, and that's where Dave had the answer, or whatever it was, I would turn off the image. I'd go to a black screen and just white text. So very much based on a true story, right? And somebody said, why don't you make those your brand colors? And I was like, let's try that. Oh, that's so much better. So feedback is just, I don't know. I get why people don't want them. I also totally get, and did I say this last week? I totally get when you just want to I just want to get it out there. Because at this point, I've probably spent about 15 hours on this thing. Because I've tried it with jumpy text. And they went, yeah, the jumpy text is a little I don't know, 2003. And then I went to text with blocks around it, and they go, what's with the blocks? And I was like, okay, how about images? Images work. Okay, good. So it's always fun to get feedback. So if you're getting bad feedback on your pilot episode, unless somebody's trying to take your show in a completely different direction, it's hard not to get defensive. But some of it I was like, I really, let's try that. And I would try it like, oh, that is better. So
yeah, you really need to, when you get that negative, we talk about this all the time, but when you get that negative feedback, listen, this is physician heal thyself, right? When you get that, take a second and immediately you respond to it negatively. Like you're like, oh, yeah. Don't do that, right?
How dare you?
Set it aside, put it in the back, like, and ask yourself this question, like, is there any evidence of truth to this? Chances are there probably are, right? And for a second, I think you gotta really work to disconnect yourself from the criticism or from the feedback. And think about it. Just set it aside, think about it. Wait till those emotions have died down before you respond or before you do anything. Just see if it is. I think we always respond way too fast to negative feedback. And I'm the king of this. So I'm telling myself more than anybody, but I think it's really, really important when we get that in to just give it a second, let it sit. I used to wake up in the morning, check my community at work, and very first thing, right, just check that. And then I would start responding back. And it, this is like 6 a.m. At 9, I would look at my responses and I'd almost delete them all because I was like, okay. And it was really bad if I'd send it via email because you can't get those back. So I've kind of learned to stop, like, check it, think about it, go take a shower, have some breakfast, get ready. Then by the time I get into the office or to my computer at 8 or 9, whatever, when I'm starting to answer those, I have a lot more clarity around that. So I think I would encourage folks, if you're asking for some coaching on this, when you get that, give it a couple hours at least before you say or do anything with it.
Yeah. I have learned, I'm not perfect at it, but I actually will feel the muscles in the top of my neck, like the hair stands up on the back of my neck. And when I'm kind of like, oh, you wait, I'm like, wait, don't send email now. I got, exactly. I got kicked out of a band once because the guy had sent out this email to a ton of people and put everybody in the blind carbon copy field, or not blind carbon, in the carbon copy field. So everybody saw everybody's email address. And I was like, dude, I'm like, I lost an email once because somebody did that, because everybody promoted their Etsy store the minute they got everybody's email. I was like, thanks. I wanted more spam. And Nilo is asking if he can ask a question. He's in Sweden. You can either put it in the chat room, or if you go to askthepodcastcoach.com/question, we're using StreamYard. I'm not sure how that'll work on your phone.
Yeah.
But if you
on his phone, wanted to dial in, but
yeah. So if you, I don't know if you can jump into StreamYard on your phone, or just throw it in the chat room. We'll be happy to answer your question on the chat. And if you're listening to this later, if you go out to askthepodcastcoach.com, in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little microphone, and you can leave a message. So if you're listening to this on Tuesday, you're like, oh, I always forget to listen live. You can always leave that there, and we will play it in the show and answer it that way. So
if StreamYard offered a dial-in number for this,
that'd be cool.
If you had to pay for it, would you pay $20 a month to have it?
$20 more?
Yeah.
Not 20. I'd pay 5, maybe 10.
Okay.
Just so I can go, is the caller there? Just so I can lift my inner Phil Donahue. I mean, you remember this. I mean, I had
caller west of the Rockies. You're on.
Or who is that? That's Larry King.
No. That was Art Bell. Would always,
yeah.
Art Bell would always do. Wasn't it west of the Rockies? Or I think it was. Or east. Anyways.
But I used I forget the name of the service. Was a thing that tied into the phone, and then I had to buy a second mixer, and I had dual mix minuses going. And then we had maybe 4 people call. That was we had the phone number. It was like and that's when we learned that our audience just likes to ask questions via chat, and we went, okay, I guess we'll do what the audience wants. So this one I thought was odd. I just sounded like somebody was getting taken advantage of. So when you're really passionate about something, you are operating on about 95% emotion, and you got to be careful when you're in that state. And so this is where I saw this, and I was like, I think that's what's happening, because the question was, should I be getting paid for hosting? And I first thought they were media hosts, and they're like, no, they mean actually hosting the show. Recently, I was hired by 2 co-founders of an online community to host their new podcast. They said initially the position would be unpaid for at least 2 months, which is the probation period where they would judge how good of a host I am, as I don't have any prior experience. After which we can settle on a monthly fee. This is interesting, because I can see where a couple different ways this could go. I'm basically in charge of doing 80% of the work: guest scouting, researching the guests, coming up with interview questions, all the communications to the guests, recording the podcast in a studio. Only the podcast edit would be done by the founders. In these past 2 months, I've done considerable amount of work, but haven't actually recorded any episodes yet. That's interesting. I've secured 2 guests and created interview questions for them. Due to their schedules, it's hard to find any time for recording. Welcome to podcasting. I'm not sure how I should be getting compensated for the work I'm putting in, since I'm new to podcasting. Usually the owners of the podcast are also the hosts. So if the podcast is ever monetized, all the money goes to them and not to me. Should I be settling for a monthly fee now, which seems fair for all the work I put in, or draft a contract that shares a percentage of the revenues that the podcast is going to generate once it's monetized? Which, okay. I don't own the podcast. I'm simply hired as the host. Currently, the podcast is not making any money. With what? It sounds to me like they haven't recorded an episode yet. So any charges are coming straight out of their pockets. So this just sounded like, when I heard this, because this was in Reddit, and Nyla, we'll get to you in just a second. I see you're backstage. And I know Nyla, we don't have to worry about
I'm good.
He
was on I think I had him even on my podcast at one point.
So when I hear this just sounds like one of those that's going to end badly. It could be. Let's go that route. But it sounded to me like, you're doing a lot of work, but it wasn't until I read this now the 3rd time that it just dawned on me they haven't recorded anything yet. So
it's not making any money yet. Like, did I hear that too?
Yeah, it's not making any money, and all they've done is found potential guests, but they haven't recorded anything yet. So it's kind of, but to me, when I see this, I'm like, the whole after 2 months, we'll see if we can agree on a fee. No, it should be. Well, first of all, this 2 months that you're doing, I would just see, let me do an episode. I will do one episode. You can listen to it and decide if you want me as the host. I'm not working for 2 months for nothing. And then they go, okay, we'll pay you $5 an episode. Well, no, I want, 50. I want 100, whatever it is. Okay, no, you're not the host then. It just, to me, I would have a clearer path up front of who does what and the fee. I don't know. Any thoughts on how you would have worked this, Jim? Or
Well, you never know, right? This
yeah,
is one of those. And we get this question all the time, like, is it worth it,
yeah,
or am I worth more? Well, you never know until you ask, and that answer may be no. I remember taking a job one time, and about halfway through it, I was like, I should have asked for more, and I did, and they said no. So, like, I could ask, doesn't mean I'm going to get it. But if I didn't ask, I definitely won't get it. So I think that's one of those situations where, like, if you really want to do this, you're going to put up with whatever they give you. If you
right,
if you're okay walking away, well, put some things out there that are reasonable for you. It's the art of negotiation, and you just got to ask. Listen, asking people around you, I mean, you can get some, like, should I be asking? I don't know. Should you? It doesn't hurt. I mean, maybe it does hurt to try in some cases, but you know the situation better than anybody. Uh, you'll get nothing if you don't ask. You may
right,
get fired if you do. So, like, how badly do you want to be there?
yeah.
I
Sean
mean,
says,
you know,
I'd be okay with the trial period, but I would want the amount and terms set before. That's me. I was like,
yeah,
the whole like,
it's
hey,
good.
if you
It's
like
good.
me, we'll figure out what we're gonna pay you. And I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
And then that's what Uncle Marv is saying as well. He's like, shouldn't they have figured out? That was me. I just sounds to me like you kind of jumped in, maybe again, because you're like, oh, I would love to host that podcast. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute. So
Yeah.
that's a tricky one. But yeah,
Well,
it's
a lot of people
and
jump in and, like, "Oh, you never know," and they're like, "Well,
right,
you never said anything." Like, you can't you can't jump into something with a bunch of potential and then get into it and not ask for more or not ask for different. I mean, if it's got potential, you're starting it not knowing what's there. Once you get into that, then you just have to ask. This is where it fails for a lot of people, is they get afraid to ask. And I get that. They're afraid of being rejected or being fired or whatever. But if you want something different, you have to ask for it.
yeah. All right. Well, let's bring Nilo up. And what's yeah, click here. There we go. And I know you're on your phone, so we're not sure what we're gonna get, but hopefully you can hear us and hopefully we can hear you.
I hear you guys great, but
Uh,
if you can hear me, then it's a
yeah.
miracle.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
we can
sound
hear.
great.
You
You
sound
sound great.
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm outdoors in very northern Sweden here, so greetings.
Beautiful.
Greetings.
Welcome.
A question about using P4 as an audio interface.
Mm-hmm.
This might be kind of hard to crack, but I've recently started using the P4, and it looks like a great piece of kit for sure. But when I'm connecting to my PC, it's a couple of years old, Dell i7 processor, something like that. Jim knows all about that. I don't. Anyway, so I get a little bit of like low hum there in the recording, which I'm doing using Audacity, and then comparing that to my, well, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old MacBook Air, also Audacity, it's dead silent, no hum whatsoever. And I've been trying to figure this one out, but no luck yet. Actually, I can't fix that even when I'm recording using the PC, since I just use Auphonic afterwards, and it works pretty darn good. But just wondering if there are any specific things I might check, perhaps.
Are they
Jim,
plugged into are they plugged into the exact same power source?
you mean the PC and the Mac?
Yeah, the PC and the Mac. Are they on the same power?
I was running Mac on the internal battery, I think, and I also tried using the PC through the internal battery only.
Yeah, usually a hum is power related. It's a cable going over another cable.
Mm.
The PC itself could have a bad power supply, or it's
Mm.
feeding dirty power into the
Mm.
it's enough that it'll work, but the audio interference that comes from an electrical circuit is pretty sensitive. And
Mm.
so if you don't, if you don't have it just right, or if you got a dirty power supply, that could be the problem. It could be a cable too. So it could be
Mm.
you've got to start eliminating. Dave and I talk about this all the time, is where you start changing out one thing at a time in this process to try and figure out, is it a cable? Is it the unit? You might want to try to move that PC to a different plug in the house and test it that
Mm.
way, right? See
Yeah.
if it gets if that does it. It could be the PC itself has something wrong with it.
Yeah.
Not wrong enough that it won't work, but it's just introducing kind of dirty power into it. And of course,
Mm.
those audio components are sensitive enough to pick up on that bad power. So that's something
Yeah,
I might
for
check.
sure.
Dave, any thoughts as you hear this?
No, because I was thinking about it. If he's got the exact same setup, and so when you look at that, you're like, look, I did the exact same thing. Then you look at, okay, what's different? And you're like, one's a Mac and one's a PC. And I'm like, okay. And then like Jim said, okay, well, is it plugged into something different? Because if they're plugged into the same wall and the same circuit, then in theory it's not the electricity, because unless, like you said, unless the PC just has worse noise, picking up noise and things like that.
Yeah.
That's where I move
Could be its
phones.
location to move it around,
Yeah.
try
Yeah.
a different spot.
Well,
Yeah.
I tried I tried using them both without plugging them in anywhere. So
Mm.
yeah,
So
it's a tough one. I guess
the
it just
PC is a laptop, Nilo?
might be that the explanation might be that one is a Mac and the other one is a PC.
Hey, easy now,
Yeah.
easy. Like let's not spread rumors, even though it's kind of true. But
Yeah.
are both are laptops then? Is what you're saying?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And does the PC laptop have a big power supply brick associated with it?
Yep, on the floor.
Yeah, and then I'm assuming you ran them. What you said is you ran them both off battery, right? So you unplugged them to eliminate the power source, and the PC still had a noise when you did that.
Yeah, but the noise it's very.
I have a question.
You hardly notice that. It's really something that first I didn't even notice it myself, and then I listened to the recording one more time. When there's just silence being recorded, and then I noticed there is really something there. It's not, like a huge loud hum at all. It's very faint, but it's there. It's definitely not there in the Mac record.
When you're recording the PC, is the laptop on the desk that has the microphone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it might be. I've run into this because when I hear low hum, I think vibrations. And because what happens is, like, I'm tapping on my desk. So if you have a fan and your laptop vibrates, those vibrations might make it up into the arm and into the, because this pod mic, when you tap it, it's got a lot of sounds, and it's something in the boom arm vibrates and it rings for a while. But I had one where I had my PC in a desk that was vertical, so it was kind of in and under where I had a keyboard, and I was like, where is this hum coming from? And so I'm changing out mic cables and changing out mics, and the minute I moved the PC, all of a sudden the hum went away. Wait a minute. I put it back down, and so the vibrations of the computer went into the desk. The desk had a boom arm on it, and it went right into the microphone. So it just might be, it's a long shot, but try picking up the laptop and see if the hum goes away.
Will do.
Yeah.
Another question.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah. If it's okay for you guys.
Yeah. That's what we do here.
No kidding. More about podcasting in general terms. I've been getting back into the game, and my podcast will have episodes both in Swedish and in English. Do you have any thoughts about that? What would be the best way of playing that?
I think I would be tempted to have two separate shows. One
No,
all
can't
in
do.
English and one in Swedish.
Yeah, I understand. That's a tough one for me.
Okay.
What's tough? I mean, what were you planning to do then?
Guess I'm to start with going to or choosing the cheapest possible option, which right now seems to be, Spotify's offer.
Well, that's free. It's hard to beat
that's
free.
free. That's right. It's free. It's a nice price. And somehow just making it clear to the audience that I hope I'll have later on that some episodes will be in English and some episodes in Swedish.
Yeah.
And then I'll obviously also, write that in the show title.
Yeah.
Just
make it super clear, right? We do this on the Gallup channels. For our live channel, I do them in Spanish and Japanese and Chinese and all these different languages. And after a while, we just made it clear, like in the title, I put what language it's going to be in, so folks know they don't get there by mistake and they're like, "Oh, I thought this was going to be in English," right? But I would definitely in the title include if you're going to switch back and forth, I would in the title put in Swedish or in English.
Yeah.
So folks can quickly see that. Yeah, that should work.
Yeah, that way they can just, if it comes up in their app, they're like, "Oh, that's not for me." Swipe left.
I might even make that the first
word.
I don't know. Yeah. You hate to waste those first 25 characters are like the most important from a viewing standpoint, and you almost hate to.
Right.
You could use the two letter code for the language, so EN and SW or whatever that is for Swedish.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. That'd work. Put them in parentheses and 4 characters, but that'd be a good way to do it. Yeah.
All right, great. And there is already, I hope, a functional web address. Can I announce it here?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so Sweden for Ukraine.
Nice.
.se. It's a Swedish domain. .se. Sweden for Ukraine. .se.
And FOR for the 4 or for the number 4?
Either should work.
Oh, okay, cool.
And you said it was .se?
Swedish domain name SE.
SE. Got it. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good work. Anything else?
I'm fine with this, thank you, and thanks a lot for your time, guys.
Yeah,
welcome.
Thanks for jumping in. You sounded great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing.
Good to talk to you again. Yeah, you bet.
It was really good to talk to you guys.
Take care. Have a great
Take
weekend.
good care.
You too. Bye.
Again, technology is amazing.
That's pretty great. Yeah. Well, shoot, you could if you got an iPhone or even some of the newer Androids, and you just put that thing in front of you and talk. I mean, in most cases,
or even better, hold it up to your,
that's crazy talk. That's crazy talk. Why would you hold a phone like a phone?
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. But Todd Cochran does that with the New Media Show. He has New Media Show and then New Media Show Video. So when you go to, Apple, you'll see there's 2 different versions. So if you wanted the English version, you could do that. If you want the Swedish version, you could do that. Or in his case, just do both and just be sure to note it, because that's really, I was thinking about that. Like, would that annoy me after a while that every other episode I have to delete? And I'm like, I don't think so. If the content's good enough, if it comes to a spot where one episode is English and the next 3 are in Swedish, I'm going to be like, you know what I mean? I'm sticking around for, that's where I'm like, if it could just be separate, I'd listen to every episode. But
would you make a good run at translating the show note and the show notes translating it to the other language each time. So if it's in Swedish one time, then you translate it to English in the show notes and vice versa. Do you think you'd make a run at something like that?
You might. Here's my question, Jim. How many transcripts have you read of podcasts?
Listen. Okay, I know where you're going.
No, I
know where you're going. Zero.
I have zero. That's
but
me.
When I don't include transcripts, because we do transcripts on the Gallup side, if I don't have them, I always hear from people like, "Where are your transcripts? I want to read this thing," and it's always amazing to me. I kind of want to say, "Prove it." That's one of those where you shouldn't respond right away because I'm like, prove to me you actually read those, but they do. And if you don't provide them, there are folks who want it that way. Yeah.
Nuno has a great point talking about getting rid of that noise. He says, I was surprised once because I was doing a coffee in my machine during a loudspeaker call on my phone and asked sorry for the noise, and people said, what noise? Yeah, there's a lot of noise canceling going on in Zoom meetings and things like that. That's where you see where it says echo cancellation and things like that. And the other one, he was talking about a low hum. That might be one that, export your MP3 file, whether using Pocket Cast, Overcast, you could even throw it in a Dropbox and then listen to it on earbuds and walk around the neighborhood. Because there are times when we're sitting here squeezing our headphones into our head going, I hear it. And I go, yeah, but nobody listens to podcasts that way. And I know in the early days of my podcast, I had a fan that was pretty loud in the PC. And I'd start off the show with an apology, which is just a horrible way to start off a show. Sorry about the fan noise. And then I would just obsess over it. And finally, one of my listeners like, Dave, I don't hear what you are talking about, and I wish you would move on. And I was like, okay. And it dawned on me that when I was listening to the recording of the fan noise, I was in the room with the fan noise. So, that was kind of silly. So we sometimes obsess over that stuff, and we don't really have to. So that's always it's always a fun, we want the best audio we can. And I always tell people I go for listenable. On my last episode of the podcast rodeo show, I interviewed a guy managing a career, I think was the name of the show. And to his credit, I think he's 6 episodes in, and he's like, no, I want feedback now, And so he's like, pick either episode 4 or episode 2, and episode 2 had a better title. Remind me to go back to titles later. But I'm listening to episode 2, and he'd had, I'm going to guess, an air conditioning on in the background. And he later then had a rather over-aggressive noise gate try to get the noise out of the background to the point where he would, it just was cutting out words and stuff. And I was like, well, on a scale from 1 to 10, your audio right now is about a 2. I go, that's the bad news. The good news is this is really easy to fix. Turn off your air conditioner, get a little closer to the mic, and sweat. It's like we artists, suffer for their art. And I mean, I was interviewed the other night, and I'm lucky enough that I have a Google Nest, so I can turn off my air conditioning right from my phone. And I did, but by the end of the interview, I got my lights on, everything, 81 degrees in the studio. I'm like, I can feel the sweat going down my back. But that was one where I was like, okay, your sound is distracting me from what you're saying. And that's, to me, that's the threshold. Like, when is bad audio too bad? When it's really, I'm no longer paying attention to what you're saying. I'm only paying attention to how it's coming through the speakers. And I was completely just distracted like nobody's business. So, but I did bring up titles. Let me see if I still have Libsyn open in the background, because last week we had the person asking about, we have a person in our community that's kind of disrupting it, and how do I handle this person without ruining it? And so I went in, and that's what I named the episode. And I had Eric Hunley on Twitter was like, man, that was a great title. I clicked right on it. And if I look at we're already getting more downloads. If I go down to in Libsyn, I have this put out as it sounds weird, but as a video, even though it's already video, I have a separate channel for Ask the Podcast Coach with a fake video, basically. We normally, so, YouTube, it's the second best way people find podcasts. It's the best thing ever. YouTube, you got to love it. We've had 9 listens, 6, 4, 5. And then a couple weeks ago, tools and techniques from a full-time podcaster, 15.
Ooh.
When an obnoxious listener ruins your community, 96 listens on YouTube.
Wow.
And I was like, that is a good title.
Yeah.
So when I talk about titles are important, my problem, and I need to fix this, is I make up my titles at the end. When I'm tired and I want to go to bed and I run it, I come up with a couple. I ask, I use CoSchedule, like headliner.coschedule has this AI thing, and it kind of grades it, and try to use more emotional words, and then you end up with a really clickbaity sounding title that I would never say. And I'll finally come up with one, but I really should. In the same way, I was listening to Bandrew. Do you listen to the Bandrew Says podcast by any chance?
No.
Oh, he's all about YouTube.
Yeah.
And he's been doing a lot of experimenting. Like, hey, everybody, leave a ton of comments. Okay, everybody on this episode, bunches of thumbs up. Hey, everybody in this one. And he's kind of finding out that the algorithm doesn't care about any of that stuff.
Oh.
He's trying to figure out what the algorithm is, and it's kind of like weird. And but he mentioned that kind of in the lane of YouTube, a lot of times people make their thumbnail at the end, and it's one of the most important things. And he's same thing. He's like, I just come at the end of it, I'm like, good enough. And then he found out that. So anyway, has Mr. Obnoxious reacted to your post about him? I doubt it, because it was in Reddit, and Reddit is a very weird place for me, because if I said I bought 12 pairs of Nike socks, I would have to put I am the head of podcaster education at Libsyn.com and the founder of the School of Podcasting, which kind of drives me nuts. I just, because I understand they want me to disclose, but I could be talking about, if I say, like I did a thing today, somebody asked about on Spotify for podcasters, people are getting, according to this person, $14 CPM. And I said, hey, just for the record, the advertised, you can hear it on the feed, CPM from Advertised Cast is $25. So outside of the Spotify walled garden. So that one I was like, obviously got to disclose. I work for Libsyn and they own that. But there are other ones when it's like, what's the best way to monetize your podcast? And I'll be like, selling your own stuff. I will then get a thing that says, you need to disclose that you work for Libsyn. I'm like, that I didn't, what? So that's, so Reddit is kind of crazy. So I went over this morning, but I didn't go back and look at Mr. Obnoxious person to see what they replied to. But speaking of making money with a podcast, Jim, do you know how every podcaster thinks they're going to make money in podcasting?
Through, I don't know.
Ads. I'm going to start a podcast and we're going to get ads.
Yeah.
And, some people say we can make money from day one,
Sponsor.
and you can.
Yeah. Sponsor.
Yeah. So, I believe this is based on this show. All right. But I mentioned Switchy, which is this cool link tracking thing. And we mentioned a couple things on AppSumo. And somebody used my link, thank you very much, and bought a bunch of stuff at AppSumo. And then somebody bought Switchy. Long story short, in a month, I made $17.20 in affiliate commissions from, in that case, impact.com. And so $17.20. So I've seen with my own eyes getting CPMs for programmatic ads, which are hey, you can make money from day one, as low as $3.80 per 1,000 downloads, which is 0.00 something. And I've seen somewhere, I've heard people talk about somewhere around $6 to $7. So I said, okay, let's just do easy math, $5. So if I was using programmatic ads to make $17.20, I'd have to have 3,400 downloads. And I was just like, how many podcasts do you know that had 3,400 downloads in an episode? Hence, nothing wrong with advertising. If you want to do programmatic ads, go right at it. I'm just here to say there are other ways to monetize your podcast besides advertising, because I don't really want to hear another Geico ad. And you just made 0.0017 cents per download. Because I remember when I did the research for my book, it was $1.70 CPM. So I was kind of glad when I saw $3.80. I was like, okay, but do the math on that, and you'll see that, like, oh, I have 300 downloads an episode, and then you multiply that, and that's where I just ask, okay, so is the $1.24 you're going to make per episode, so you're going to get $6 by the end of the month, is that worth annoying your audience for 60 seconds with an ad that has nothing to do with them? And only you can answer that. So, but I just I don't know. Everywhere I see it, it's like, oh, I'm trying to get ads. And I'm like, okay, I get it. So, meanwhile,
that's not where I thought you were going with that. I thought you were going to use that to jump into the.
Oh, yes. For more information about making money with your podcast, I talked about this in my newsletter this week. I said, educators suck at marketing. We just do. Yes. If you want more information about that book I mentioned that I did research, profitfromyourpodcast.com, the tagline, proven strategies to turn listeners into a livelihood. And if you'd like a signed copy, go to profitfromyourpodcast.com/book. Yes, I should.
And well, not only that, but I thought you were going to thank our awesome supporters.
Yes. Yes. And we have a special, it's interesting because if I can find it, I think this is it. I hope so. We'll find out in a second. I uploaded it earlier. But yes, we would like to thank our awesome supporters. Because the good news is, remember last week we got Randy Black. Well, we lost one, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Yes. So yes, this podcast is brought to you by the schoolofpodcasting.com. We've got courses, we've got one-on-one coaching, and we've got really one of the best communities, I think, in all of podcasting, because it's spam free. We've got the head of IT, we've got a psychologist in there. We got a bunch of podcast consultant, which is kind of interesting. But if you would like to either, get your podcast going, or if you already got a podcast and you want to get it growing, schoolofpodcasting.com and Podpage. Oh, hey, let's share our screen, shall we? If we go here and go to sharing, and I want to share, am I going to get a weird kaleidoscope? Can I go? Here we go. In Podpage, looky here, V3 stuff. And so, of course, Podpage, now with AI, he's building in SEO stuff. So where you can kind of grade your website on how is it doing via SEO. So V3 feature settings. So your newsletter RSS feed. So if you want to bring in your newsletter, so key phrases that you're trying to rank for. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So he's adding a little more emphasis on the SEO part of your website. So if you want to try Podpage, go over to trypodpage.com. If you want to learn Podpage, go to learnpodpage.com. And if you need more Jim Collison, and hey, can you really get enough Jim Collison? Well, then go over to theaverageguy.tv. And we're on the journey to 40, and I wanted to do this. Yes, we have happy music. We're not happy to see him go, but I just want to thank Kyle Bondo. Kyle Bondo has retired his support. He's got, we all got situations, and sometimes you do the budget and you go, you know what? But am I mad? I'm sad to see him go, of course, obviously. But Kyle's a great guy who has supported me forever, and he is the guy behind, if you're in Texas especially, OnceTold.cloud is his podcasting company that he's got going there. I know he did Gaggle Pod, and of course, Merchants of Dirt, which is the best name ever. So thank you, Kyle, for the years of support. We thank you. But that does mean, dear listener, that, maybe if you're in the chat room right now and we're answering questions and you're like, I should give some of that value back. We're on the journey to 40. We were up to 36. we're back to 35. And you can help by going to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And thanks to all of our awesome supporters. And I do deeply appreciate that. So let's see here. We do have a question from Starzology. Says, can others see my podcast download stats? Nope. And I'm not sure why. I wish we could. It'd be fun. Because I will tell you this, everybody, and when I say everybody, I mean everybody, lies about their stats. My favorite is someone will hire me for one-on-one consulting, and they're on Libsyn. And I'll, in the thing, it'll be like, you know, what can we help with? And like, oh, I'm getting X amount of downloads an episode, and I need help doing such and such. And I'll go into their Libsyn account, and I'm like, yeah, that's your monthly stats, not your episode stats. And so they're not really lying. Maybe they're misreading their stats, but no, nobody can see that. And monthly stats, I haven't said this in a while. Monthly stats are crap because in theory, every month they should go up, because when you first launch a podcast, you have 4 episodes. Let's say you do a weekly show and everybody, you know, listens to this and this and that. So you get your monthly stats. Now, the next month, you have episodes 5, 6, 7, and 8. But the person that finds you on week 8, if they like week 8, should be going back and listening to 1 through 7, which means you're going to get a lot more downloads in that second month. Now, which is sad because, look, I'm here to tell you, mine go up and down and up, and it's like the stock market. But this is where you have to know your why, because look, I'm guilty as charged. We all get fixated on stats, but unless the goal is I'm going to start a podcast and get sponsors, downloads may not really. Like, I just looked at the stats for Ask the Podcast Coach for the first time in a long time, and I was like, oh, is that where we're at? Oh, all right, you know, because I'm not getting sponsors. I'm doing it here to answer podcast questions live and give free podcast consultant. And of course, the biggest bonus, hanging out with Jim Cullison every week, you know. So you have to know your why, and really only downloads come into play if you're doing, well, I don't want to say they don't count, but in terms of sponsors, if you're looking for monetization, I mean, they help in helping you figure out what's working, what's not. So, but no, they can't see your numbers.
Yeah. We wouldn't do this if it was 0, right? Like if Ask the Podcast Coach was at 0, we'd be like, well, listen, it's not possible. We wouldn't have sponsors and it'd be at 0. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
Right. That just wouldn't. Both the sponsors that we have here find value, and so they continue to support and to be a part of the show and to kind of be in everybody's brain every Saturday. That's kind of why they do what they do. So those seem, you know, but I guess you ask yourself the question, what is the number I wouldn't podcast for? You know, because like at some point you're thinking 50, 25, 10. You know, what's the number when you start, like, for, let's say not this one, but let's say School of Podcasting. At what number do you think you say, you know, it's time to retire this thing? You ever thought of that? Have you thought of that?
I never have really thought of retiring it. That is a show I rarely find myself going, time to make the episode. There are times that I'm not so much I don't want to do the episode, is I'm in the kitchen, nervous eating because I want to come up with something good. And I'm like, I've already covered that. I have kind of slowly come to the conclusion that I'm going to allow myself to repeat myself occasionally, because I'm at episode whatever 800.
You have to.
Yeah,
you have to repeat yourself.
Yeah.
There's no way you can be 100% original all the time.
So, but I haven't thought about that. The Akron podcast, I think I finally am going to kill I've killed that thing 5 times, and then I'll be like, nah, let's try it. And then I'm like, oh yeah, there's still only 24 hours in a day. I don't have enough time to promote this, you know? So I kind of go through that. That's really the problem, is podcasts are hard to have just one. And when you launch your 2nd or 7th or 9th or whatever you're on, the launching part is easy. The RSS feed and the image, and here's the description and the media host and blah, blah, blah. And there it is. It's launched. And I'm like, yep. the hard part of a podcast is not making the podcast, it's getting people to find it and listen to it and tell a friend and that whole 9 yards. And that's the part that takes a ton of time. So, and now you're trying to get, you just split your, what little time you had left in two, because now you got 2 podcasts. And so, yeah, Tim says I run 2 podcasts on that media host for my day job, and everyone can see the stats per episode. Oh, he's on Spreaker. Spreaker does that. You can see your stats.
You can shut them off too. Well,
you can shut them off, yeah.
And some hosts you can say don't show these, and some maybe you can't. Yeah.
So Tom Taylor had a question. He was recording in QuickTime. Can it be moved into Hindenburg? If not, at least Garage. Yeah. If you can, I'm not super familiar with QuickTime. I use it all the time to listen to stuff. But anytime you can record in a WAV file, or if I remember right, AAC on a Mac, that is the lossless format. Now that file is going to be ginormous, but it's the best sounding recording. And I always try to use the best sounding recording until that final edit, and I'm ready to export as an MP3, because that's the joy of the MP3. It takes that ginormous file, compresses it down without losing too much of the audio quality, and then you throw that up to Libsyn. But yeah, you can, especially in Hindenburg or Audacity, you can open those up and edit them away. When I first started off, I would record an MP3, and then I would edit an MP3, and it just, in the end, I sounded like I was frying bacon in the background. It was just like, all right, welcome to the Marketing Musician Podcast. Yeah. And I'm like, wait, I have the same format as Adam Curry. Why does mine sound so bad? And then I found out, oh, he records in WAV, keeps all the quality, and he only mixes down to an MP3 once. So anytime I get even if somebody hands me an MP3 file, like that's what they have, the first thing I'll do is convert it to a WAV and then edit that and then export it back to an MP3.
Yeah, and listen, you can't, MP3 is a compressed audio format, right? So when you're getting WAV or AIFF or any of those lossless, right, you're getting all the digital content for that file, right? What MP3 did was cut off the top and cut off the bottom and compressed it. That was the magic of taking, in the early days of MP3, was that you could now reasonably download these things across this new thing called the internet, right? The MP3 only exists because the internet came along. Yeah. So you're compressing that down. Dave, in your case, if you're taking MP3 and you're converting it to WAV, you're not magically getting that data back. You're just putting it in a different format that's lossless, right? But you don't get any of the MP3. You don't get any additional stuff back that was compressed when it was made in MP3. So let's just be clear. Be clear about that. It doesn't. Yeah. It's not like it's magically
restoring everything. No.
Yeah. I mean, it's best to record in those lossless formats first. Do all your editing, then compress it to whatever format you're going to use. For Thomas's question, today, most of the DAWs, most of the audio, I don't know them all, so I can't say all of them, but most of them really are compatible across all file formats that are standard audio. If it's audio, 90% of the time it's going to be, like you said, it's going to be WAV or AIF or ACC. Those are all file formats that are really, really common. Or on the MP4 side, MP4, M4A. There's a few other video formats. I said, so what's your extension? He's like, I have no idea. Chances are, even if you can't see it or you don't know it, it's going to work just fine. If you're moving between DAWs, you're going to be fine. The difference in this would be with Audacity, native out of the gate, or at least it used to be this way. They did not support video formats without an extension or without a plugin being added to Audacity. So if you wanted to take a video file, drop it into Audacity to edit the audio out of it, you lose the video at that point. But you
have to add a weird
plugin,
like you said, plugin,
FFmpeg or something like that. I think there's some kind of plugin. But yeah, in most cases, Thomas, just bring it into Hindenburg. You're going to be just fine. You'd have to be a really odd format for that to not work. Yeah,
and Hindenburg even does video now. I don't know if it's kind of like it with Audacity. it converts it into
Listen,
audio.
yeah, you absolutely want to download the best file format you can,
Yeah.
and Wave is way better than MP3
Yeah.
for quality, right? You're going to get the max. That's why the files are so much bigger. It's because they have
Yeah.
all the data in them.
Yeah, because Nuno's asking, "Hey, I use Squadcast. Should I download the Wave or the MP3?" Yeah,
Wave for sure.
Wave all the way. I record in Wave. I edit everything. And then at the end, it's up to you. The one thing I like about Hindenburg is I might have a ton of different files, and then when I export it or I save that, I forget what they call them, probably a project. It takes all the files and puts them in the folder. So everything to make that Hindenburg file is in one folder. So at the end, whatever else is in that folder, I get rid of. I'm like, okay, this is, it's all in there. I need it, and it's good to go. And I used to export. This is something I don't do anymore. I used to export as a WAV file and then export it as an MP3. That way, in case, who knows? 60
Well,
Minutes comes calling and they want to hear it. I've got a version of the MP3, and I was
It
like,
does give you, listen, as a data guy,
yeah,
I'm very uncomfortable with this conversation because I keep everything, right? And
yeah,
you never know. You're like, well, maybe I made a mistake and I want to go back and re-render it so I can go
right.
back to the original wave or back to the original loss list. Let's say that, and I can make the edits and then recompress it. We don't even think about this anymore, but there used to be there were two MP3 formats too, right? Fraunhofer and
Oh yeah,
Lame, I think was the
Lame,
other one.
yes.
That Lame was the other one. And the pretty much today that's all baked in. We don't even know the difference for the most part anymore.
Well,
But
Fraunhofer, whatever the weird thing was, the patent or whatever,
it was like the
was,
trade copyright
yeah,
or whatever it
yeah,
was. Yeah.
it's not the
Expired.
time expired. Yeah,
Expired. Yeah. Yeah. In on a lot of the DAWs, you could check to see what the encoder is, because that
yeah,
matters. So if you're using a DAW, you should be able to go in and say, hey, what's the MP3 encoder for this? Because it's going to go in. And listen, MP3 was magic. Like what it did, the way it did it, it was so revolutionary. I remember this would have been maybe 97. I remember someone telling me, I worked at a computer store at the time, and they came in and they said, yeah, last night I recorded this album off of a CD, and now I'm it's at home right now, crunching it down to an MP3 so that I can put it on these new video
yeah.
audio players. So that you could only put like 8 songs maybe max on this thing, even though these were tiny little files. And I remember thinking, I mean, this were the Pentium days. This was like Pentium 1, Pentium 2 days,
Oh,
Pentium
geez.
3. And all day to take an album and crunch it down to an MP3. Today, that'd be, I don't know, 10 minutes, maybe, to do something on a modern processor. So MP3, podcasting has it needs to give as much credit to MP3 as to like anything else. Without that, podcasting never gets off the ground. If we don't have that MP3 format, podcasting never gets off the ground. It's just too big. Audio files were too big.
I remember working on podcasts, listening to streaming radio over a thing called a Real Player, and it was like 16, whatever it would be, megabits per second. It was horrible, but it was like, oh, cool, we can listen to and then I remember when streaming video came out, and literally the streaming video was the size of a postage stamp.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was like, here it is, you can
Yeah.
see it. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah. Of course, we're all back then. Not everybody had, like, are you on dial-up, or do you have a cable modem? Ooh.
Oh, that was a big deal. I was early on that. Yeah, and even video formats have, we did a lot of work H.264 and some of those other formats to compress this stuff down. Today, like we're not even asking. I mean, now they're like, hey, can you stream that in 4K? Right.
Oh.
So we're kind of we've gone beyond the compression formats. I'll be honest, we don't really need to compress audio anymore. Like we haven't need to compress audio for like 10 years. The fact that people are taking, like Dave, your WAV file and then compressing it down to a little tiny 128 or whatever MP3, For most of the world now, it's not the cases everywhere, but for most of the world, it's actually not even necessary anymore.
Yeah.
10 years ago, yeah, bandwidth was an issue. Today, not as much. Again, not everywhere, and there's still people are going to be like, Jim, there's still spots in
There
the
are people in
world.
Africa, and I'm like,
Exactly.
yeah, I go.
Okay, that's true.
And,
But
and I always go, and those people aren't my target audience. You know what I mean?
right.
So
Yeah.
not that I don't care about them, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to start screaming, "Move to where the food is." Do you remember Sam Kennison? Oh, never mind. I'm total tangent. But anyway, Tom has a great point. He's using MOV files.
Yeah, it's a movie format, and
so
I'd have
that's a
to I'd
video.
check Hindenburg. So like I would check Hindenburg to see if they support that extension for editing.
Yeah, I was trying to see. Yeah, see, I just have on my Mac, I have a QuickTime player, and I'm assuming if I could I'm trying to see in QuickTime if there's a way you can say when I record, use this format. I'm sure there probably is, but I just have the player. I don't see anything in here.
It does.
Yeah.
And Hindenburg does. It says Hindenburg just from their support. Hindenburg Pro lets you import, edit, and master the audio off of video content. And so it does support that.
And one thing we should mention, since we're talking about file formats, I've seen a correlation here. At Libsyn, if you upload an M4A because you recorded it on your phone and, whatever.
Or other reasons, M4A supports some things that.
Right. But here's the thing. If you upload an M4A to Spotify, it only works with MP3 files. So Libsyn has a setting. We can go in and say, if you give me an M4A, convert it to MP3 and give that MP3 file to Spotify. And that the person that does that is also the person that will send in, not that I don't love all of our customers, but that person will send in a thing going, why isn't my episode appearing in Spotify yet? And I'm like, because you sent us the wrong format and we had to convert it, and it takes a second for it to get converted, and then we send it to Spotify. So if you want to be compatible in all the apps as quickly as possible, use an MP3 file. I go 128 stereo if you don't care about stereo, because really, I mean, I'm not even splitting me and Jim. Everybody's right down the middle here, aside from the music. You kind of don't need stereo, but I do anyway because I'm an old musician. But if I wasn't, I'd go maybe 64 mono if I want to cut my file size in half. I know some people go 96 mono. I listened hard. I mean, I squished my headphones into my head and I listened to the difference between a 64 and a 96 mono and could not hear a difference. But I have other people like, oh, you can't do a 64. And I'm like, really? Because it's the same thing as a 128.
Why would you do it now? Why would you compress it that low? Why would you need to?
I don't. That's the whole thing. I mean, in 2005, we were worried about bandwidth and taking too long, but now it's like,
And listen, there's going to be the purists are going to come out and be like, oh no, there's places in the world. I get that. I get it. Know your audience, all those other kinds of things. But it's just a discussion. Listen, when we're talking about streaming 4K video files, like, you're like in most of the world's 1080p, like we're full HD in a lot of cases. And so, again, this is not even a discussion I think we need to even have anymore around.
Well, Uncle Marv brings up the point. Depending on who your host is, I know Libsyn, Blueberry.
Oh, true. Very true.
If you're doing a daily show, right, then now we're into a spot where I only get to upload X amount a month unless my bill goes up. That would make sense. I know Mark Maron, again, kind of in the early days, was exporting at like 46. I was like, wait, what? It's like he found the absolute, like, okay, this is as low as we can go without, killing stuff. So killing the quality. So, but, and here's what
we're on 5G for most phones now, and a lot of cases 4 or LTE. And again, I guess that could make a difference. But the phone companies have kind of pushed us. You're getting home, and most folks are connecting to the Wi-Fi in their house.
Yeah.
Most folks have 100, gigabit connections are getting super popular. So I'll stop kicking that dead horse.
Well, no, it's I always tell people, and it's funny. I don't have my phone download podcasts until I'm on Wi-Fi, and so I wake up in the morning, all my files have already been downloaded. But if you're worried about chewing up your phone plan,
Yeah.
you can go into almost every app and say only download on Wi-Fi. I am not going to be able to answer this question. We're going to have to go to the chat room for this. Unless, do you use Reaper for anything?
No, I do not.
Is there a great advantage of using Reaper over Audacity? So as always, because it's a podcast question, we have to answer with, it depends. I know Reaper it has a lot of features, but Audacity's added some stuff recently that, now you can have VST effects in Audacity, which used to be one of its kind of like, so maybe the interface. I know I've tried to learn Reaper twice and it's not hard. I just looked at it and was like, okay, here's a learning curve. And I thought about it, because it's, on one hand, it's kind of free. I think if you want to pay for it, it was $60 and it was kind of on the honor system. Like, hey, if you're using this, you should probably give us money. But for me, especially now with VST effects, I'm like, there's so many tutorials on Audacity. And for the record, I'm sure there are plenty on Reaper. There's probably some other features. The question is, are those features you're going to use? And that's really something you have to kind of know. Okay, what am I trying to do here? What do I need it to do? And then kind of go from there. I mean, I've mentioned already, I'm moving the school of podcasting from Podia to New Zenler. And New Zenler has a ton of features. And I spent yesterday watching a ton of tutorials. Vimeo, the video service, by the way, went down for about 10 minutes yesterday because I'm watching New Zenler tutorials and I was like, all right, well, I don't know what's going on with that. So I went over to heartbeat.chat, which is a thing I'm probably going to use for the community. Went to watch their tutorials. Yeah, it didn't work either. And that's when I went, wait, Vimeo's having a problem. But there's all these features in New Zenler. And that's basically what I did yesterday was, okay, I know it slices, it dices, and juliennes. Nobody in my audience wants to julienne. We just need to slice and dice. So just because Reaper might do more, it also might be more of a learning curve. I mean, Adobe Audition will do your laundry. I mean, that's an amazing piece of software, but the interface, you have to get used to swapping back and forth from kind of the single file editor back to multi-track. And then, I mean, it's an amazing piece of software. And I would say I could make this podcast sound better if I used Audition. Why do we always pick words that are almost the same?
Yeah.
But I don't think this podcast sounds bad. I use Hindenburg. I love Hindenburg. So what do you use? I think you're an Audacity guy, right?
Yes. If I need to edit the files that way, it's just simple.
Thank you, Uncle Marv. Uncle Marv says that the only real advantage is that it does video.
Yeah. I think if you're a beginner, Audacity is probably where you want to go. If you're looking for something more advanced, you could use, I think Reaper will satisfy that need.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Hindenburg. I was trying to find the great show prep, Dave. There is a podcast manifesto from the podcast host, and I heard them talking about it on the Buzzsprout podcast, and I went over to the podcast host and I don't see it. But they interviewed like 1,400 podcasters and they were kind of talking about what people are doing and what they're not doing. And I wanted to look at that before the show. And I thought, I'll just go over. I'm sure it's right there on the front page. So if anybody wants to find the podcast manifesto from the podcast host, let me know. Meanwhile, Michael Krause has a question. Are the features that you are going to use is absolutely correct. Oh yeah. Use the ones that you need. Cause I forget, Vidyard, I think it was a video tool that I paid a lot of money for a year. And once I finally, because I got a sales guy on the phone. I had to talk to him to get a price. That is, anytime somebody wants you to call them, don't. And they talked me into, I think, a year contract. It was a lot of money. And in the end, all I needed was the stuff I get from Loom for $15 a month. And I think I was paying like $85 a month for this thing. And it was like, that was, and I even tried. I'm like, hey, can I get out of my contract? And they're like, no. And I was like, okay. And then I finally got it to kind of do some stuff I wanted it to do, and they figured it out because I was kind of hacking the system. And they're like, "Hey, you can't do that." And so, yeah. So don't get completely mesmerized by the new shiny stuff. I mean, that goes right back to Threads. We were talking about that at the beginning. Randy wants to know, have you tried any of the new Rode products introduced this year? Which brings us back to the Rode Pod Mic USB. Now, for the record, I've used this, well, counting this show now, for about an hour. I mean, I had about 10 minutes into it. One of the biggest things they did was this, is they gave you a giant pop filter. Now, the old Pod Mic, I had a popping pee problem. And let's please bring pizza pronto. Thank you, Bandrew. So this one, without this, I don't hear it as much. But if you're like, yeah, but I want to look like Joe Rogan, they gave you, and I, from understand, you're going to be able to buy this to put on the old Pod Mic. And this is the USB one. And so, yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, audio listeners. And what now, again, I didn't read the manual. But I pulled it out and I plugged it in. They send you a USB to USB cable. So if you're like, my computer just has USB 2, I'm kind of screwed. My USB 2 to USB-C converter is showing up today, thanks to our good friends at Amazon. But I have a cable here, but that's the problem. It's like 6 feet long, so I can barely plug it in. But I expected, like, if I plug this, this is an Audio-Technica ATR 2100, right? If you're on a PC, hey, I'm configuring the microphone. Okay, your microphone's ready. And I can go into Zoom and say, hey, use this microphone. No software needed. And I know PreSonus had a microphone that I bought that you kind of had to run the PreSonus software to get the mic to work. And 10 minutes of using this microphone, I plugged it in, and it was the weirdest thing because I'm like, I have my Rode headphones going into my Rode microphone. I got the microphone up on USB, and I'm like, I don't hear anything. So then, I plug it in, and again, your microphone is configured, and I'm like, wait, what's going on? So then I go down to my video or my audio sounds on a PC, and if you know this, when you adjust the audio, it always goes pling and makes a sound, and the pling like blasted my head. So I'm like, okay, I know my headphones are working. Going back to troubleshooting, I'm like, okay, it's not the headphones, it's not the volume knob. And so I was like, what the heck? So they have you download some software. One is Rode Connect, which I can go in, and I was like, oh, here we go. I was on like 1.7 of the firmware. I'm like, I bet that was it. Click, click, click. Nothing in my headphones. I'm like, So I go back to we have this Rode something software. So I download it. Now what's cool is, because this is what I saw in London, it looks like a Rodecaster, right? I've got the exciter, the big bottom. I can record multiple tracks. I've got some virtual version of a thing. So if I wanted Jim to come in on the virtual channel, so you can really it's a recorder. And all of a sudden I can now hear myself in my headphones. And I was like, okay, what changed? I'm like, oh, I started another piece of software. So with my very limited knowledge, this could very easily be operator error. It appears that I have to be running this software if I want to hear myself in my headphones. Yeah. So if via USB, I will say I like the sound of the mic. I've got it going into the Rodecaster 2. I've got it set to the Pod Mic settings. So I was like, hey, I'm using a Pod Mic. So
let's be clear for a second. When you say via USB, you're talking about not the mic going in via USB. You're talking about the Rodecaster going in via USB.
No, I'm talking about the mic. The mic.
Because you're XLR right now, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm XLR because the USB part was throwing me for a loop, because I was thinking I just plug it in, bling bling, Rode Pod Mic, and then I thought what I saw in London was this other software, and you can adjust it. And I was like, okay, I thought, and again, this is all presumptions here, I thought you could make settings and then save them in the mic. Like I could say, turn the big bottom on, turn this on, adjust this and that, throw it in the mic, and then plug it in, and those settings would be
no.
And I don't think that's the case.
No, I think they're local. I think they're local with the software. That's why they make you, like the Focusrite does the same thing, right? it needs a little bit more. I mean, natively, it just won't work, right? You're going to need a little bit of software to enable that audio to come through.
Yeah, it's kind of it's bizarre. I will show you real quick. We will go share the entire screen. So we're going to get a little kaleidoscope action
Or
going
if you
here.
read the instructions, Dave, that might.
What are you, crazy? Well, first of all, there weren't any.
Crazy talk.
There's a little QR thing, but this is what so you can see when Jim talks, Jim is coming through as system audio.
Now. Yeah, there we go. So
yeah, and I can now, you guys can't hear these. I'm assuming if I click on an air horn.
Nope.
Yeah, so I can, because it's going through the Rodecaster, blah blah blah, but it's on another channel probably. But so you can, you've got basically a Rodecaster here, and then over here you've got your sound pads, and then here, then this is where, recording view. So this is where when I go here, anything I've recorded, I can come in here and play and export in that whole 9 yards. So it's pretty slick. I just was surprised that I have to run this other software to be able to hear it in my headphones of the whatchamacallit. So it's again, that's my 10-minute review. I like the sound of the mic. It's $200. That's the thing. So for $200,
that's not terrible. That's not terrible.
No. And I just was like, okay, I just need to know, do you have to do I have to run this software? And so far, again, 10 minutes into it, it appears the answer is yes. So we shall see. Coach Dave is chiming in on, we're talking about DAWs, right? Reaper and Audacity. He's a big Logic Pro fan. I think that's what Bandrew uses over at bandrewsays.com. Has some keys for my Stream Deck. That's always fun. And then he also says, better start pumping some weights to get a closer haircut if you want to look like Joe Rogan. Yes. Lots of, I'm working on the light on top. So, and yes, I can label those sound pads, because I now have, if I go over here, I have new patron. So if we need, yay. And then we have, goodbye to old patron, which is the happy, but kind of set you off into the sunset kind of, and those are labeled now. I also have DLR Woo. Woo! So, because everybody needs a little David Lee Roth in your life. So
DLR.
But yeah. Well, it's we're Americans. Anytime you have 3 words, you have to abbreviate it. It's in the manual. Pabst Blue Ribbon, Kentucky Fried Chicken, everything is just 3 letters now.
Right.
Because if it's more than 3 letters, we just can't take it. So
we're not going to take it. Full circle. But we're not going to take it. No, we're not going to take it.
Which also kind of looked like Poison, right? Guys in makeup. Yeah. Nice callback.
Is that Twisted Sister?
Yeah, it was Twisted Sister.
Is that Twisted Sister? Yeah.
Yeah, D. Snyder.
Snyder.
Big D. Snyder fan. I could never take the sound of Twisted Sister guitars. It always sounded like it was recorded in the basement. But anyway, speaking of things that are recorded in the basement, Jim, what's coming up on Home Gadget Geeks?
Gavin Campbell from HomeTech.fm is on. We talk all things home assistant and home automation. We even talked about some sensors you can put in your lawn or your garden to check the moisture level, so you know when to water them. And if you had a home automation watering manifold, it could turn on the manifold and start watering your lawn for you when it gets dry. So we have a great conversation around it, and it's going to be available. Actually, it's available right now, homegadgetgeeks.com.
And on the School of Podcasting, it just dawned on me, I talked about most of the stuff today, what I'm going to talk about on the School of Podcasting, the importance of feedback. We're going to talk about I'm going to beat this thing a little more, the Rode Pod mic, and make sure that's not operator error. And so we'll talk about that and a couple other things that are going on in the land of podcasting. And of course, we're here every Saturday at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time, the only podcast giving live podcast advice at 10:30 Eastern. There you go. So we're
on Saturday.
Yeah, on Saturday. On Saturday, even better. Yeah. So if
for
you're
sure, we're the number one. I think we're the number one
show. So thanks so much. If you're watching the video, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, and we will see you next week with another episode of Ask the Podcast Coach.